Good day, everybody. This is John Scarborough. I'm in my kitchen today. Figured I'd make a little video today answering a question that I had on one of the comments. The comment was about fencing and my thoughts on what type of fencing I think is better and what I use and what I don't use. And a really quick and simple answer of what I use is a little bit of everything. And only because that's what's on the farm right now, like on the different farms. As y'all know, if you've been watching my videos very long, I have a pretty good bit of different properties, whether they're lease or my own property or whatever have you. Sometimes there's a couple pieces of property, people, they're near the property that I'm leasing. They'll let me run my cows in there, just kind of as a way to clean up some of their grass and everything. So, generally you're going to use what you've got, especially if it's already good fence. Even if it's not necessarily what you would have built, you're going to use it regardless, So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. I want to talk about permanent fence. I'm going to refer to my notes so y'all don't get too weirded out by me looking away, but from the camera. I'm gonna talk about some permanent fence, cross fence, electric fence, barbed wire fence, net wire, and we're gonna talk about some pipe fence. And if I think of any more, I'll put it in there. And if y'all have any, if you can think of any other types of fence that you want to hear my thoughts on, then just put it in the comments, and I may make another video, a follow up of this one, or we might talk some more. As far as fencing in general, this is just going to be an overview. There's a lot. I mean, I could talk for an hour about different types of fencing. Probably I could talk about an hour about electric fencing, all the different options and things like that. For the most part, I'm going to try to stick to the stuff that I know, and maybe mostly towards the stuff that I like, or maybe just the most common stuff. Okay, I don't want to drag the video out too long. Okay. So let's start with your permanent fences. Not your permanent. I'm sorry. I mean your perimeter fences, and that's actually another thing I want to talk about. I don't have it in my notes, but is permanent versus temporary fencing. Okay, I do want to talk about that too a little bit. Touch on it maybe. So your perimeter fences. Your perimeter fences, you want to be a solid fence. You want to be a fence that you know for a fact nothing will ever get through, no matter what, okay? So a lot of times I've seen people's, their perimeter fences and everything, they'll have like some barbed wire, and it'd be kind of a sag here and a loose spot here or something like that. And what's funny to me is their fences, their cross fences will look exactly the same as their perimeter fences, and it's fine for a cross fence, but it's not really all that good for a perimeter fence. And so you end up seeing cows kind of on the road, or goats or sheep or whatever. You see a lot more things like goats and stuff and things like that. People not having the type of perimeter fence that they need. Your perimeter fence should always be rock solid. You should never have any trouble with your perimeter fence, especially if it's right next to a road. Okay, every now and then, like with cattle, you don't have to worry as much about your perimeter fence if it's up against a wood line. But if you build that fence up against a wood line, 2 years later, the logging company goes in there, logs that whole place, and then the owner of the property turns it into pasture, and then you don't get to lease your cows out there. Well, now that's good, lush green grass, and you don't have a good fence. So I always say, if it's a perimeter fence, do a good job no matter what type of fencing you build. There's all sorts of different types of fencing that you can do. So no matter which one of these that I'm talking about that you like better, just make sure it's a good, strong, tight perimeter fence. Okay. Let's move to cross fences now. With cross fences, I've seen cross fences go from one strand hot wire down and all the way up to full-fledged 5-strand barbed wire fences with huge, just tons of money put into a cross fence. Okay, I actually saw one of the fences that's on a property that I'm leasing right now. It's a 7-strand cross fence. Okay, and that is way overkill. In fact, the fence is beat up worse than the rest of them because the deer can't get through the fence, and so they end up hitting the fence and trying to get through the fence and everything else. It's just an overbuilt fence for a cross fence. Okay. I mean, even if you were trying to hold elephants in for a cross fence, it's just overbuilt. Okay. So really on your cross fences, in my mind, one thing I really like for cross fence, I've seen people do, and I have it in a few places myself, is just a single strand hot wire. And that works for cattle. Now for sheep or goats or something like that, especially goats, that's not going to work for goats. Now sheep, I've seen people pull it off. One strand for the sheep, and even one strand for the cows and one for the sheep. And that works well once you get them broke down to it. And for horses, that seems to work pretty good for horses. Horses sometimes can be a little bit more finicky. I'm not a huge fan of raising horses. I really like horses. My mother-in-law, she loves horses. When I grew up, I used to just love horses. And now I don't really raise them myself just because they're kind of hard to handle. They eat all your grass. And I mean, I really do like them. And I hate to down horses too much because a lot of people I know that might see this video is probably going to be bashing me a little bit for saying what I'm saying. But what I'm really trying to say is I actually wouldn't mind owning a horse one day, but I'd probably put it on my mother-in-law's property with her horse and just pay for feed and hay for that, for the horse. But as far as that goes, like if you're going to use a barbed wire fence or something like that, you don't have to have near the wires. In fact, a 4-strand barbed wire fence or a 3-strand works really well. Like I said, when you're using hot wire, you can get away with less. And it depends on the animal, of course. Now, one reason I'm going to go ahead and say I've raised just about every type of farm animal that I know of, besides sheep. I have not raised sheep. My brother has done some stuff with sheep. He's raised a few. He's got a little experience in that. I don't know anything about, I do know stuff about sheep. I've read about them pretty extensively, actually, because I'm considering adding some sheep into what I do in the future. Okay, so I actually do like sheep, and I'm really wanting to try it out, but I have not done anything with it. I have raised pigs, I've raised goats, I have not raised an alpaca, okay? So I haven't raised everything, okay? But I've raised pigs, goats, cows, just about every type of poultry you can imagine. Goose, duck, chickens, pheasant, just a host of them. We've raised rabbits, we've raised all of those things. And most of those things I raised at a younger age, and no, just so everybody knows, I didn't raise them in 4-H or to show, and nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that's not what I did it for. I actually, at 13, I was actually selling animals for meat, okay, and selling them to people as whole animals, and so I kind of got into this at a very young age, and then got back out of it for a little bit, doing pipeline and stuff like that. But I've raised animals since I was young, and I was successful at selling them. Okay, so I've done quite a few different types of animals and worked with quite a few different types of fences. Also, have built quite a few pipe fences and things for other people. Okay, so I do have a little bit of experience in fences. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more now about barbed wire fences, okay? When you go to a leased property or when you buy a piece of property or anything like that, in this part of the country where I live in the South, Louisiana, I grew up in Texas and I live in Louisiana now. Both of those places, or at least East Texas, and then where I'm at in Louisiana right now, both of these places, barbed wire is going to be your main fence that you see. You're going to see it everywhere, no matter what. Most likely, if the property is fenced at all, it's got at least one barbed wire fence. Mostly, it's all barbed wire fences. Now, it might not be very good. Some of them might be pretty rough, in fact, especially depending on what you're looking at. So, what my thoughts are on barbed wire, I'm mixed on it. I like it better than some stuff, but I don't love it. I do like the idea that it's there, it's strong. Unlike electric fence, like an electric fence, if it breaks in one spot, well, it's pretty much broken everywhere. It's turned off, and things like that. It's an actual physical barrier, and if you build it solid enough and strong enough, you don't have to worry about anything getting through it. So there's a lot of good things I can say about barbed wire over a lot of fences, really. If you break one strand, all your other strands are still there. I would definitely not rule out barbed wire. I mean, there's a reason we've been using it for a long time. With that being said, it's not necessarily my favorite in the terms of everything, is what I mean to say. By itself, I'll put it to you that way. Really, my favorite fence, I think, would be a barbed wire fence with electric fence on it. In other words, like a strand of electric on it. So like a mix of the two. And for I'm talking like a perimeter fence. That way your power never gets turned off. And a lot of people would disagree with me, okay? But I like barbed wire down real close to the bottom, even if I've got a complete electric fence. So I'll go into electric fence a little bit, I guess. Even if the whole thing is electric fence, I still, on the very bottom, if I'm running like a smaller animal, like a goat or something like that, on the very bottom, I'm still going to want to run a strand of barbed wire that's not hot, because everything's going to touch that bottom wire. Everything is, okay? So it's really nice to have some barbed wire there, okay? Now, even if I did the rest of it in the rest of the fence, I did all in hot wire. Sometimes I find, like in places like in the woods, more wooded areas, you got trees that could fall down on your fence and things. Sometimes I find that it's nice to have hot wire in the middle and then one strand of barbed wire up top. And what that can do is help protect because the barbed wire is a more flexible metal. Now, if you go and tie it to each post real strong and all like that, it could still bend and break, okay? So we all know there's negatives there. But if you do it right on your post and you put it on that very top one, it can actually help protect all of the hot wire below that. That way you're less likely to ground out. That's just the way I've done it. I've seen a lot of people pull off nothing but a hot wire fence, and it worked great. They never have any trouble out of it, okay? And so I'll continue to talk about electric fence now. Electric fence, I think what I really like about it is its psychological barrier, okay? So the reason I really like electric is because on a barbed wire fence or any other type of fence, an animal's going to rub on it, they're going to touch it, they're going to try to push their head through it when there's a lot of spring grass like there is right now. And when an animal touches a fence, eventually an animal tears up a fence. That's just the way it is, okay? So I like at least some electric fence in every fence that I have, because it keeps the animals from touching the fence. And I don't have that currently everywhere that I want it, okay? But at least, like I do have some fences right now where I've got a barbed wire fence, and then I've got one strand of electric across the bottom, and I'm hoping to be able to use sheep like that, be able to introduce sheep in some of those pastures with that. And that one strand of electric in those pastures works excellent this time of year to keep all the cows and calves from sticking their heads through and grazing on the other side. So it saves my fences, even though it's not a full hot wire fence, okay? So that's the nice thing about hot wire. They're psychological. They keep the animals from touching them permanently. Now I'm sure, animals test fences. Even when they know it's hot, they'll go back and test it every now and then, or accidentally bump it and rub up against it. That's usually what happens. So that's the scary part if it was turned off for very long. Like if you were on vacation or traveling or something like that, and it was somehow or another, something happened to it, and it was off for very long. If it was just hot wire, I would fear that possibly something could get through it. And that's why I go back to kind of liking a little bit of a mix of, both barbed wire and hot wire. That way I know for a fact I'm comfortable with feeling like that they're not going to get out of there, as far as, and I'm talking about going back to my perimeter fence on that deal. Okay, So, and then another thing about the electric fence is it gives you, like I talked about earlier, it gives you the ability to have one strand of fence, okay? And also, the electric fence gives you flexibility, lots and lots of flexibility when you talk about introducing temporary fencing, okay? And so temporary fencing, I'll touch a little bit on that. If you don't know anything about it, they have all sorts of different options now for temporary fencing. I mean, the temporary fencing nowadays is almost better than the permanent fencing. They've got single strand poly braid that you can run. They've got all sorts of different types of temporary. Some of it's not so good. Some of it's really good. I really like the nine. I think it's called a mixed metal, and it's got no, I don't remember. Maybe it's 6 different types of metal. I'm not sure. I don't remember for sure, but it's a mixed metal and it's a poly braid. That's the most important thing. You're not going to pick it up at some of your big box stores. I'll say it like that. As far as I know, you're going to have to order it, or at least I did. Anyway, you can do that, and then they have a lot of things like netting, poultry netting. They have netting that will work for sheep and goats and all sorts of things. And I tell you what, as a guy that's raised goats before, everybody talks about goats being hard to keep in. That's not a lie. They are hard to keep in. You're going to have to use the right type of fencing. And I've seen people use straight runs of electric fence and they can't keep them in because the goats still jump through them, okay? Now, I have seen people be successful at it. I personally have not. I'm not raising goats right now. I don't know that I'll ever raise goats again, just simply because there's not a huge market for it over here. Where I was at in Texas, it was a lot better market for it. So I don't know for sure if I'll be raising any goats. If I do, I might just raise a few. But we'll see how that works. Whatever the case may be, they're a lot harder to keep in with your fencing, okay? But with some of that temporary netting fence and things like that, those are some options, some really good options that people can use. They can use that net wire for goats. They can use it for chickens. They can use it for pigs. They can use it for all sorts of options. Almost any animal you want. You can keep a rabbit in there, and you can move them around anywhere you want. So that's what's really nice about electric fence and about having some permanent strands of electric fence all around your property is it's so easy to just hook right in, okay? So that's kind of my take on electric fence, okay? Now, I want to talk a little bit about net wire fence. I would say that I have a love-hate relationship with net wire fence. And I'll put it to you like this. When I was younger and we were raising goats, like I was talking about earlier, it was really difficult to keep goats in for a while, and then we discovered net wire, okay? Now, when I talk about net wire, I'm only going to talk about the good quality stuff. There's a lot of that cheaper stuff, not worth getting. Don't even do it to yourself. If you're going to buy net wire, go good quality woven wire net wire, okay? None of that welded together stuff. That stuff will break, and it's not worth buying, okay? Or at least not where I was using it, okay? That's just my own experience. So I'm talking about good quality net wire here. Where I was at when I was raising goats when I was younger, at this point I was probably 14 or 15, and we were kind of starting to have trouble keeping them in all the time. And a lot of that has to do with the breed of the goat. I won't go into that just a whole lot. If someone's interested in my take on goats, I might put a video out there. But anyway, your breed does make a big difference in keeping a goat in. I promise you on that. But anyway, your net wire fence for goats does seem to work very well, okay? In fact, I'd say that it saved me. And when I was that age, I actually built quite a few net wire fences for other farmers around there that was trying to keep goats in. And I got pretty good at building fence that would hold goats. Because it's more than just a net wire fence, it's the way you build it. Goats find a hole underneath, they're going to go with it underneath. If it's too low, they're going to jump over it. There's some breeds of goats that actually climb trees and then they still jump over the fence, okay? I wouldn't own a goat like that for nothing, okay? And not the ones that climb trees. I would definitely own a boar goat that will climb up on a tree, but not all the way up the tree, okay? But anyway, so the net wire in that specific case for goats, that is pretty much the only time I like net wire fence. I'll go ahead and say it right now. I have some net wire fence that's on here on this property right now that I'm leasing. I don't like it. And there's multiple reasons why. One is, okay, first of all, if you want, you can spray any fence you have and you'll never have to worry about stuff growing up through it. I'm gonna just go ahead and tell you my personal opinion on spraying fences. I don't like it. We try to run our farm in such a way where we can be somewhat regenerative and where our grass will continue to grow and where we can do things strong and things like that. I'm not against someone else using sprays and things like that. I find that my soils do a lot better, my animals do a lot better and things like that, and I just don't like bare soil, okay? But my biggest reason, I'll tell you right now, my biggest reason for not liking spray in this part of the country is because we have some really, really steep hills. And so what happens is if you go in there and you spray all of those fields, not only are you killing all your microbes in that area, okay, but you're killing the ground, the soil, and when the winter comes after those cows walk up and down that dead spot right there, and the winter comes and it's going to wash your post right out of there. I guarantee you it's going to happen, okay? This part of the country, I am not a proponent of it at all for sure because of that right there. And if you're on a hill or something like that, it's a bad no-no. You're going to lose a fence that way because the water is just going to continue to wash and wash and wash and wash. And if you have animals, especially if you're planning on doing permanent grazing and you're not rotating your cows, they're going to walk up and down that fence, okay? So I don't believe in spraying my fences that is my main reason. And then I just personally don't like to use the sprays. And then there's also a cost deal. There's always a certain cost in having to go buy that stuff and basically